Hey there, Sterile Processing Universe. Welcome to 62 Ways to Save the Day, the power of sterile processing chemistries. My name's Bobby Parker with Beyond Clean, and I am excited to be welcoming you to this webinar. I'm thankful that you've chosen to take some time out of your day to talk about the importance of pre-cleaning chemistries and the importance that it plays in just a sterile processing workflow, what it can mean for our patients, and what it means for our workflows in the department. So I know this is going to be a great discussion. We've got panelists with us from all across the spectrum of care, from the front line of sterile processing through leadership to the sales and support side, and from a scientist perspective. So I'm excited to introduce these guests to you. Joining me today, I've got with me Preston, Jim, Jared, and Rod. Welcome, guys, to the platform.
How's it going?
Excited to be here.
Before we get started, I want to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself. So why don't you tell our audience a little bit about your background and what connection you have to this particular topic around chemistries and pre-cleaning. Preston, you want to take it?
Yeah, my name is Preston Rosales. I'm a supervisor at Honor Health in the good old sunny Arizona. And honestly, detergents, they're near and dear to my heart because I deal with them every day. And definitely knowing the ins and outs is part of my job. So I'm excited to talk about this.
Awesome. Welcome. All right, Jim, how about you?
So I'm Jim Tyrrell. I'm the manager of sterile processing at Silver Cross Hospital in New Lenox, Illinois. I've been here for 12 years now. Been in the world of SPD for about 30. So I definitely had my share of the goods and the bads of detergents and what they mean for SPD, which is they're critical for us.
Yeah, if you've been in the industry for 30 years, I'm sure you've seen a lot of different things come through. So yeah, looking forward to seeing what that experience brings to the conversation. All right, Jared.
Hey everyone, my name is Jared Watson Lewis. I am the brand manager for our detergents portfolio at Stryker. I've been at Stryker for about 7 years in a variety of roles between sales and marketing.
Awesome. Loving that power background you got going on, Jared. This is going to speak volumes. and welcome to the stream. Rod, how about you?
My name is Rod Parker. I'm probably the most envious of any of you that I am a retired consultant. So I spent 27 years with Stryker. Before that, I spent 18 years in pharmaceutical toxicology. So my working time is my own now. So you're all delaying me from my golf outing. So don't worry about that too much. But the main point for this connection is for the last 20 years, I've been a formulative scientist for every aspect of the Stryker detergent line anyway. And I've been a sitting member for many of the AAMI, Canadian, and ASTM standards committees, and still participate in 2 of them today, having to deal with cleaning and standards associated with chemistries for SPD.
Awesome. Well, welcome. And Rod, I've been on a couple of these with you now, and just want to say thanks for taking time out of your golf schedule to be invested in pre-cleaning and patient safety. I do love that.
I like to stay involved.
Yeah, involvement in the communities and in the sterile processing discussion in particular. I appreciate that. So, well, guys, welcome to the conversation. I know that this is going to be a good one, just because there's a lot of thoughts around pre-treatment. Whose job is it? Does the chemistry that we pick matter? There's a lot of different options out there, and maybe not a lot of education reaches the front lines about what makes a good pre-treatment product. We just use the one that supply chain kind of shoves at us and move on. And so there'll be a lot of opportunity to talk about that. So to get things kicked off, just kind of a fun icebreaker here, I want to ask, what is one word that you would use to describe instrument cleaning chemistries? What's one word if you had to constrain it to that?
No, I'll go first. So I've been thinking about this, and the word I came up with was convoluted, because there's a lot of information. It's very all over the place. Like, you have to make sure your IFUs are on point. Like, it's very convoluted.
I hear you.
My word would be magic. And really, without the chemistries, our SPD couldn't do the magic that they do. So that would be my word.
I'm the marketing guy, so I have to do this. I'm gonna throw out our brand. I'm gonna say Speed Spray 62. It's all one word. And its impact and value to the entire process, especially pre-treatment.
And I'd probably sum it up, from the pure science side of thing is I'm going to use a strange word, which would be misguided. And I hate to say that word only from the standpoint to elaborate a little bit is, it's one word, but it doesn't assign a blame from that perspective of saying whose fault is it or what it is. I think misguided from a perspective, as Preston mentioned, there's an enormous amount of information that is communicated. We have yet to follow up that communication with the data and the supplied scientific processes that go into creating treatments for that purpose. So maybe we'll explain a little or explore a little bit in this session. So
yeah, we're not malevolent. We're just ignorant. Is that what you're saying, Rod?
No. Well, yeah, it's. I wouldn't say it's ignorant from the standpoint, but as people mentioned, magic was a good word that Jim said, was the fact that from a science perspective, none of it's magic.
Right.
It's all set in how you develop the things that you decide to put in those products to make sure they work. And some of that, when I may say misguided, I'm not only just talking about maybe what we pick or what the information we get, but also some of the direction we get from our regulatory bodies to tell us what we're supposed to come out with to do that. Because some of it is a little confusing.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to diving into that as well. And we have aptly named the conversation today 62 Ways to Save the Day, with a nod to Jared's call out there about the Stryker pretreatment product, but also because there are frankly a million different ways that pretreatment products are saving the day for our patient. And so for those worried listeners that we're going to march through 62 different points and that you're going to be here for the next 3 hours, we're not going to do that, but it's my hope that you will have at least 62 takeaways from this conversation that you can implement, or something interesting that you learned. So with that, let's start at the top. Let's start with the beginning of the cleaning process in the OR. Before we necessarily get into a particular discussion around pretreatment products, let's just talk about the pretreatment process. Why is it so critical to the overall cleaning process? Like, why do we do pretreatment at the point of use in the first place? And are there any particular issues that you would say would arise from a process without pretreatment? And let's start with our end user folks. Preston, you want to give us a start into this conversation?
Yeah, sure. So honestly, the importance of pretreatment is just to keep that bioburden moist, right? Because once it dries, it starts forming biofilms. They're harder to clean. So the biggest thing about that is making sure your instrumentation is open, make sure that all surfaces are sprayed, and really educating, the staff on how to properly use it. Because the most important part is just keeping that bioburden moist. You got to keep it moist in order to properly clean it on the decon end. And so another thing about enzymatics is that enzymatic starts working immediately, right? As soon as you spray it on, it starts breaking down those proteins, the fats, depending on what type of enzymatic is in your spray. But it is super important as that first step in pre-cleaning, so that, decon, the staff and decon can really get that instrumentation clean and provide a clean and safe instrument sending it through the wash.
Yeah, that's really helpful, and does kind of outline and break down for us what the importance of the process is. I want to push back just a little bit because you talked about that enzymatic product and beginning the pre-cleaning, but I guess in your view or your experience working with an OR, is that where the pre-cleaning starts? Is where that spray is sprayed on after the procedure, maybe in like a soiled utility room, or does it go back even further than that?
Well, that's part of the convoluted word that I used, is that it depends on the spray you're using. I mean, there's pre-enzymatic sprays that you can spray in the OR because they don't aerosolize, right? But then there's others that do, and you have to spray that outside the room, or you have to wait until the patient's closed and out of the room before you spray. So there's honestly, there's a lot to it, and it kind of depends on which one you're using and the process that your hospital has in place for that.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Jim, anything from a user perspective or leadership perspective that you'd want to add to this discussion about the importance of pre-cleaning, where it starts in the OR, any of that?
Well, first of all, so we clean 1 million instruments a year. So we have 1 million chances to make a mistake. And so that's my thing with pre-treatment, is that just lessens the chances we can make a mistake if it's hit early. If the instruments are done properly with pre-treatment, we'll be much better off in SPD, because every SPD is short-staffed. If it's that one instrument that you overlooked, at least if we had a pre-treatment on it, you had a better chance of having a better outcome as it goes through our process. So I always say that up front. I mean, we're treating literally 1 million instruments a year. Pre-treatment is a requirement there that'll help us with that process. So
yeah. Absolutely. And from a cleaning science perspective, Rod, anything you want to add that this is specifically doing for our instruments, is protecting us and protecting our patients from harm?
Oh, yeah. Oh, well, I don't get the whole hour, so I won't talk about everything.
Yeah, give me the 2-minute version.
Yeah, I'll let you go back from having been around in the areas as long as I've been, I spent an awful lot of time, I should say prior to COVID, but I spent an awful lot of time, when they used to allow vendors in the ORs to observe OR practice. And I've seen some really good practice, and you mentioned it earlier about where does pre-cleaning start. And a really good practice is when someone in the OR has taken the time or the extra step to wipe off what we would refer to, as gross contamination, which really starts the whole process of how these scientifically based chemicals can work. In other words, if you leave a huge glob of material on any piece of equipment and you spray it with a chemical, the chemical's got to fight through that big glob of stuff to be able to get to the process. And I think what you'll find with any IFU from any manufacturers, it'll say remove gross soil. And if I don't get a smile from my end users when I say, do you always get something that just looks, perfectly clean when you get down? And I know that answer. So yes, I mean, there are practices in the OR where that starts. And then once that gets started, the way the chemistries work, make it work much better. And I'll just make one slight caveat from the standpoint of a type of detergent. Enzymes are great when things are wet. The minute things start to dry, the enzymes stop working. It doesn't mean they're not there. They'll still work if they get wet again, but you need moisture, and what you need is water. So you need moisture and water and something, and a lot of that water is in those detergents. But it's just as simple for the surfactant-based cleaners to work in a pre-treatment perspective as well as the enzyme-based ones also, because for surfactants, they're exactly what they say. They're surface active agents. They're the things that start working on the soil that's there immediately, and you can combat pre-treatments in both ways.
Yeah, there's definitely a discussion to be had there, and in just a minute, I'm going to let Jared out of his cage and tell us tell us a little bit about that discussion around surfactants and enzymes and rinsability and all of those types of discussions. But before we launch into that, I really want to underline, highlight, circle, and bold what you talked about in that pre-treatment being a process. If you were to look in any standards, whether you're looking in the AAMI guidelines or AORN or AST's guidelines, when you look under the pre-treatment section, you'll see that it's not a product, it's a process, right? It starts when the instrument is soiled at truly the point of use. And so if you've got a 4-hour-long spine case and we're spraying a product on it after an instrument that got used at the beginning of the case sat dry for 4 hours, we've really created an opportunity for that soil to set in create risk for biofilms and things like that. And so this conversation around pretreatment has to be more of a process and a partnership with our OR than just bringing in a particular product and putting it in the rooms and calling the process done, right? And so I wanted to ask our end user folks about what experience they've had with getting SPD and OR to work collaboratively, to work together on this, and what maybe success have you had in navigating that difficult discussion, because everybody's busy and nobody likes having more duties piled on them.
I can start with that.
Jim, you can start this one.
Yeah, we can.
Go ahead.
So we actually have an audit form that is in our SPD decontam that we actually audit the case cards coming down to us and how the instruments are set up, if they're sprayed appropriately, if they're opened, you know. So we empower our decontam people to, you know, give us information immediately, so we can go back to the OR immediately if we need to, which is effective. And they know that. So that's just an extra incentive for the OR to say, hey, it's important, and we're going to be consistent, you know, in the process. And if it isn't done, we will let you know. And vice versa. The OR lets us know if something isn't done right. So we have constant communication going all the time. I'm in their OR meetings every morning, in their huddles every morning. So that tends to open up communication on anything, and especially pre-treatment. We're talking about spraying all the time. So it's all part of it. Keep the communication open.
I love that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Jim. Yeah, I agree with Jim on the communication aspect of it. Communicating is such a huge thing, and opening that communication with the OR and SPD. Another thing is just having a defined process for the OR to follow. So there's a lot of gray area around instrument pre-cleaning itself, as far as, keeping sterile basins on the back table with water to clean it off. And then doctors don't like that because, water is a pathway for bacteria. So then now there's studies that say, oh, put a little betadine or iodine in your water to prevent microbial growth. Like there's just so much to it that having a defined process for staff to follow is so important. Another thing is just, being empathetic to scrub techs and understanding what their job role is and how demanding that operating room is. And just, like I said, be empathetic and understand the pressure that they're under, and just try to explain it in a way that, hey, this is just helping everybody. Help me, help you. And it's just really getting everyone on the same page and following those processes. I mean, I've done this at 2 hospitals already, is implementing a pre-treatment process. And the biggest thing I had to do was I had to go and scrub in for 6 months and learn the processes and learn the steps that they take, because how was I able to speak to it unless I knew? So I went in there and I defined a process that they could all follow step by step by step, and it worked perfect. And I think a lot of the confusion is just the gray areas in the processes. And as long as you have that set process, it'll be a lot easier for the staff to follow on both ends, in the OR and CSPD, or even the offsite facilities that we process for, because we do a lot of offsite ambulatory centers that also need to pre-treat their instrumentation. We do endoscopy, where pre-treatment for endoscopy scopes is huge. There's a lot of steps to it, and just having a defined process makes it easier for everyone.
Yeah, that is so key, and kind of putting your 2 answers together there. You've got to do both. You've got to define that process, have some empathy, and you also have to have some kind of method of following up. Jim talked about those audit reports, and whatever method you use to figure that out, whether it's got a form you fill out or a scan point that you scan in your tracking system, to make sure that keeps going. The whole point behind it is collaboration and empathy. And you may get the feedback that, hey, we don't have time to do this, and I would encourage encourage you to take that excuse, that feedback, not as an objection, but as a statement of reality. It may be very well true that they don't have the time to do that. So that's just an opportunity to bring in an IP and administration and say, hey, we're putting our patients at risk. ORs have been shut down for this, and our OR techs don't have enough time to do this. How can we rework either our surgical schedule or our staffing to create time to keep our patients safe, right? And so, yeah, I love that approach of understanding, defining a process, and then having some follow up. Jared, I want to hear from your perspective about what the Stryker team is doing to try to help facilities navigate this pre-treatment process and find success in establishing a good process.
No, it's a really good point. I think I like to start with, and our teams like to start with the why and what's important. And a lot of times in OR, there's a big focus on efficiency and turnover time, and OR minutes is a lot of, there's a lot of dollars associated with an OR minute, but a lot of times people forget about SPD and the importance of how they impact each other's efficiencies. And I think when you can bring both teams together to say, hey, if you are having issues with your turnover time up here, it could be that maybe downstairs they're not getting what they need. Maybe downstairs they have to take a little bit more time because your team is not following the processes. And if you do work together, then everyone wins. SPD has more efficiencies, the OR has more efficiencies, and that turnover times that people really focus on will decrease. And we definitely have that with our speed spray that I talked about before as my word. We definitely have focused on that and finding ways that Preston talked about of being able to make that pre-treatment process as easy as possible, where you can apply it in the OR. And another thing, like Jim talked about, being able to audit it. It foams. We have the color that's associated with it. So when it gets downstairs, people can see and confirm this was done. It's still moist. It's still activating. It's still working. And there's no activation time on it, so it happens immediately the second the nurse or the upstairs staff begins to spray on. So trying to make all of those efficiencies work together, and I think utilizing the field sales rep to educate both the SPD team and the OR team, and really connecting the leadership on both of those.
No, that's perfect. And I wish we had some visual examples to show. Probably a lot of our listeners aren't familiar with that Speed Spray 62 that you mentioned. Can you tell me a little bit more about what that is and how that is helping either the consistency with the process or maybe speeding that up for a time-constrained OR?
Definitely. We've taken those aerosol cans and those pump spray bottles that you may have seen, and we put it into a more automated system that rolls on a roll stand, or you can put it on a wall. And then it automates and foams a spray over your instruments. So in the cart, it's very easy for the nurse to grab it, spray it over, and then we also have channels for endoscopes to be able to get internally inside of some of those channels. It makes it very easy for someone to just pick up, use, roll from room to room if needed, or if you have an elevator that goes down to SPD, you can also leave it in there so that you do have some more joint usage, whether that's from the SPD team that's moving up and down, or the nurses that roll it in there, or the techs that roll it in there. And I think making it extremely easy, taking the aerosol piece out of it so they can do it with the patient in the room if needed, and get that activation going as soon as possible, plus having it foam on there. And it actually works, and Rod may be able to speak a little bit deeper on the actual science of it, but I actually guarantee that he'll be able to speak deeper on the science of it. But it actually will work for multiple days. So if it's something that's sitting over the weekend or he didn't get to it, it'll continue to stay moist.
Yeah, that's really helpful, and it really highlights an important concept in Lean Six Sigma and just general process optimization in general, that the best way to get compliance is make the right thing the easy thing to do, right? If we're going to require people to take on this new task, let's knock as many obstacles out of the way as we can and make it as easy to comply as possible. And so I love that what you all are trying to do there is to make the process, make it easy and make it easy to get full coverage, instead of pumping a pump spray bottle 57 times on a particular tray. You've been doing this for a number of years, Jared. Have you seen the implementation of that product have any kind of impact on an OR's success and getting that pretreatment process done?
Definitely. This product specifically has just released within the last 12 months, so it is newer to that space. But
Sure.
we've seen it be really impactful because, like you said, depending on your staff, those bottles are pretty large, and having to pick them up, lift them, and spray. We did see some staff that had complaints on it may be a little too heavy. There's carpal tunnel, and we wanted to remove all of those obstacles and just make it a really easy light squeeze that's tied to a cable. And we've seen that it's more inviting mentally to say I want to do this because they're not thinking about those obstacles that they've seen previously. So it's definitely being implemented really well, and because of the ease of use, we're seeing these being put in multiple in every OR versus having one that may get forgotten that's rolled from room to room, and we're seeing it just being more of a focus for staff because it's more inviting.
Yeah, love that. So, Rod, I want to invite you to tell us a little bit about the considerations that departments should be thinking through about particular pretreatment products, whether it's the Blue 62 product or others. Are there any particular types of advantages, disadvantages, and just categories that we ought to be thinking about for pretreatment products?
Certainly. And it's a good thing that you mentioned it. First thing I'd like to do is clarify, we all know it, and you guys all speaking here all have very good knowledge of it, but we have to make sure we communicate to folks is we never really want to spray. The term spray gets people a little bit crazy even in the OR. And I say that from a chemical science perspective because what we do is promote things to foam. So foam, from an aspect of, you're just looking at particulate droplet size. So in other words, when you're spraying something, you can aerosolize that very easily from a standpoint it gets into the water. We all know that. So when we look at pretreatments, we want to stay with things that either foam or things that have a heavy droplet perspective, so that as Jared mentioned with the speed spray systems or the fast associated things, you can cover an entire tray at one time with foam in a very short period of time. I see some guys have beards, so I can't really talk about this from a standpoint, but I think about shaving, like if you could put all of your shave cream on at one time with just went boom, and then you don't have to put it on. Otherwise, and put it on your hand and rub it all over everywhere. That's what I equate to somebody pumping onto the process. In other words, you have to continually do it to cover the whole space. With the speed spray type of thing, you can just wand it across and you cover the entire tray with an enormous amount of foam. And it's the key point with a lot of pretreatments is the coverage and the amount that you get onto the tray, because the trays aren't, as you guys mentioned, we like all of the scissors, everything to be opened, but you all have seen the mismatch that you see sometimes when you see a tray returned downstairs. And you look at it, it's like, well, there seems to be some pretreatment on there. You see some kind of extra little like watery droplet things or some kind of stops, but you should be able to tell, that this has been applied. And with foaming, it's easier to see. And also from a science perspective, people get me on my dye perspective, but what we did at Stryker's formulas for all of our detergents was people said, why did you use a dye? And I used a dye so that you could see that things were applied. You could see it when you put something in a sink, you could see it. It's like the free rinsing part of it has to be with making sure you can get all that off, which is another important point. But just to mention that foaming is best for coverage. It's best for amounts scientifically to soak back into the tray once it's covered on the top, and it doesn't allow aerosolization. So that's the first thing. The other thing that was mentioned real quick was moisture. And I come back to this time and time again. Moisture has to be handled from a standpoint of the ability to make the equipment get to the place for its next step. But timing is, and we all know that, the concept of pretreatments, that it has to last a certain amount of time. I always paraphrase this by saying, when is it ever a good time to keep something metal wet for days? I don't care if it's stainless steel or a tray or a bin. if we're processing things appropriately, and what I've seen in the field is people doing a religiously excellent job of getting things done as fast as they can. But as Preston mentioned, and they can all speak to this after I finish, is, we have satellite areas, we have ambulatory surgery centers, we have things that take a while to get to their process. And in that case, we need the ability to either apply a cleaner that keeps cleaning or allows the instrument to stay in a status state before, until it gets to the place of cleaning. We have to be very careful with things that, and you mentioned, Bobby, about things that we should avoid. And you have to be careful with things that maintain moisture that are not water-based. When you start getting to things that are glycerin or glycol-based, if you've ever seen this, and I know people have, if you're in an ambulatory surgery center and you've seen something come in and it actually is sticky, just remember that that's going to take a lot more time for that to be rehydrated and washed off. And how many of you have more time to get these things clean? So if something comes in from an ambulatory surgery center that's 2 or 3 days old, it can't be processed in the same time frame as something coming down from the OR that's maybe a couple hours old. So,
yeah, that's really helpful. So you mentioned a lot of things there that I just want to highlight. So you mentioned visibility is an important thing. You want to be able to tell for Jim's audit forms whether or not the process has actually been done. Jared, you mentioned an activation time, making sure that this product is going to start working and working quickly. Rod, you talked about its rinsability, whether it's water-based or if it's glycerin-based, and how does that product perform as time goes on and it starts to dry and get sticky? Does it have to be rehydrated to get rinsed off the thing? And then the one other thing before we move on to other detergents is the enzymatic discussion that was kind of brought up and teased a little bit earlier. There are some products out there with anticorrosives and enzymes in it, and others that are more interested in just keeping the thing wet, or surfactants. How do we navigate that discussion? Is there any particular advice that you have for us on what type of product to be looking for?
Yes, and I would preface, I might make Jared's day a little more difficult from this point forward, but what I would tell him, ask your supplier to demonstrate what they've done to prove that things actually do what they're saying. The question I have, and I said this from a misguided perspective, the regulatory agencies tell us to ensure that we have at least one product that works and that we validate the product works and all those types of things that they tell us to do. But if you read carefully their lines, they'll say a particular product or product type. And when they say product type, what you all hear is what Preston said was enzymatics. I can tell you scientifically, there are 100 different enzymatic types, both from which enzymes you use as opposed to the amount that's in there. So the real question that the management and the SPD folks to help your staff out would be to say, what's in there and why and how does it work? And what can you show me that tells me that it does that? So enzymes, I've worked with Novozymes, which is a leader in enzymes in the world. I know those guys very, very well. Enzymes work, but they only work if they have the right conditions. But if you support those conditions, they can really help you do things for products that need those types of products. There are times when you do speed, when people are talking about no one has extra time, an enzymatic product that you're only going to wash for, maybe 10 minutes may not be that advantageous for you to actually work with. I mean, a good surfactant will do the same thing. So just ask and say, we all have to challenge them somewhere or another. We all should have some data to show what we did. So that'd be my best advice.
Yeah. I love that advice. Be an informed consumer. Where's the study? Show me the money. Very good. Well, guys, and we are cooking through this webinar, and we still have so much more to get to about detergents in general, because I want to move past the discussion of pre-cleaning and get into the detergents in decontam. Any other thoughts or comments on pre-treatment products before we keep moving forward? A head nod will do.
You're good.
All right, great. Well, let's move on down into decontamination then. So the instruments have been appropriately pre-treated, they've been transported, and now we are in the decontamination room. Can you talk to me a little bit about the critical role that detergents play in the functionality of sterile processing departments? And I guess we'll start with our frontline users and talk about, the number of different detergents you probably have in your decontaminations right now. And like, how important is it to understand those detergents, the different types that you have in there, and the role that they play in the cleaning process?
I can start.
So
First
I
of
think
all,
that as a leader in a department. Oh, sorry, Jim. Go ahead.
but first of all, we're always getting pressure from our supply chains on costs. So I hate to say it, but that's one of our drivers.
Yeah.
So we have to, if it's going to work better, the product's going to work better, but it still costs more. We have to actually do a show and tell and explain why we can use this product. So that's always the battle we have. No matter what SBD you're in, you're going to have to show the value and with the cost. So that's number one. Number two, if you get multiple different detergents, staff aren't going to use them right. It's got to be standardized no matter what we're doing. So we're always looking to standardize no matter what it is in SBD, especially in decontam. So it's a couple of quick things.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll speak to that a little bit as well. The cost is a huge thing. I think another thing is the IFUs for the washers, because if you have a Steris washer or Gedding washer, the IFUs are going to ask you to use that certain detergent, right, or that certain enzymatic from that company. So as long as you have background data, and Jared, if the reps who come in and push the product have information that can back us up if we do get surveyed, that is a huge help as well. Because as Jim talked to, there's a large number of different types of enzymatics and detergents, even in the same brand. Even like detergents, you have a neutral, right, detergent, you have alkaline detergents. Enzymatics, you have just one single protease enzymatic, or you have a triple enzymatic, or there's just so many different types. And as Jim talked to you have to understand them, and you have to understand the detergents and the enzymatics that you're using, and then is it right for your machine? I just had a situation a couple of weeks ago where we switched our enzymatic because the washer, it's a Da Vinci washer, requires a certain enzymatic, but that enzymatic isn't compatible with our ultrasonic, so it's making our ultrasonic fail. So now we're in between, do we have two different types of enzymatics? And as Jim said, it gets really confusing back there with two different types of enzymes. And then even the certain types of enzymatic we have, there's one that's just hand wash stuff. There's one that's just washer. There's one that's just ultrasonic. And just educating your staff on the different types is hard. It's a challenge. And it's a challenge we deal with a lot. And then back orders. We deal with back order issues all the time. And that's a huge thing too, is making sure you keep your enzymatics and your detergents in stock. Because if I go on back order, I just have to order, something. I have to have something running in my washers. So we're looking at different companies. We're looking at different types of enzymatics. So what can we run in our washers? And it's a lot. There's a lot that goes into it, and keeping the consistency is important, but it's a very difficult path to go down because there's just so much to it, and so many different types, and so much to know.
Yeah. Have either of you guys had any particular strategies work out well for getting technicians to be trained on the science of what's going on with those detergents? And has that been useful at all to your team's workflow?
Well, I can start. I mean, we rely on our reps on that for training. So that's important. I can sometimes talk till I'm blue in the face. They don't. So you have to bring in the experts.
Yeah.
And that's helpful. So just know that.
Yeah. No, that's good.
Yeah, and getting staff buy-in. Staff buy-in is important because a lot, and I love my staff to death, but they're not going to sit through an hour presentation on what an enzymatic does to a piece of gross contaminant, right? It's just the chemistries and the science behind it. They just want to know how to use it, and I think that if you give them a general base of this is how you use it, this is what it's used for, then I like that is better than going in depth. Okay, this is the types of enzymes that are in here. This is what each enzyme does. This is this. This is that. If you give them that general overview, it's a lot better, and they, retain that knowledge a lot better than providing them with an hour of education. And so I do agree with Jim. Having our reps come in and talk about it is great, and it gets CEUs, and the staff are super happy because they can recertify with them. But just constant education and checking the competencies of them using that detergent and the steps and processes they're using in decon is really, in my opinion, the most important part, along with education, obviously.
Yeah, and I've found that having that education can help solidify some of those processes in people's mind about like why it's important to use a particular water temperature, or why it's important to make sure that we pay careful attention to the label as we're hooking it up to our washers, that we don't mix bottles up, because they have an idea of what each one is designed to do, even if they don't exactly know how it does it, that they know that that their pre-wash is this particular detergent because it cleans that stuff, and then you go to the neutral pH detergent for this, and you've got a lubricant in with your final rinse to help your instruments, but you don't want to put it on these certain instruments or implants because they're contraindicated in the IFU. Like, just having those kind of one statement ideas about what each detergent does can be really helpful in cementing those processes for our technicians. So yeah, I appreciate you guys sharing that. When we think about just detergents in particular, circling back around to what they're doing, how they can impact the workflow from Stryker's perspective, I guess, are there any things that we should be considering about detergents and what makes them effective? Either of you guys.
Absolutely. Let me clarify a couple things that everyone may not know. When they say numbers of the enzymes, and I may be a year or so off, but other than the detergent that I formulated for Stryker, the same two enzymes for protein perspective have been in use for 40 years. It doesn't matter what your customer tells you, your supplier tells you. There's only been two. Alkylase and Savinase have been the only two proteases that have ever been in there. When you start to mix many types of enzymes, then you have to have, it's not the enzyme, it's the amount of the enzyme. And I don't even have to say it from my perspective. You can look at the competitors, go to the major competitors' websites. They have comparisons of enzymes. You have enzymes, detergents that are marketed today that don't work any better than water. These are detergents. I mean, it's like I know you guys know this because you hear this stuff all the time. We do it in our marketing and everything to tell you, here's why this is better. I can tell you that my detergent that I formulated has 4 things in it, period. People ask me, why don't you have an anti-corrosive? Why do you need an anti-corrosive for stainless steel? We're not talking the pretreatments, we're talking washing. I love the thing when I look at a detergent and it says, use this for the automated and use this for manual. When in anybody's world have you ever used scientifically dishwashing detergent in your sink? Scientifically, they can work. Scientifically, the chemicals can work, but they're not optimized for that perspective. And I use that term, optimized, which I've spent an awful lot of time with Stryker. I mean, Jared, I know he knows this. He's going to let me talk about it, but from the standpoint that we spent an awful lot of time optimizing detergent chemistries and the amounts of things were in there. When I made an enzyme, somebody said it's the amount of enzyme that's in the product, not what enzyme it is. I mean, it can be, but depending on what you're trying to clean, but to make it simple, and we're all trying to talk about, not to make it more confusing. So I think simplification is the best. And I also think that proof of the concept that you can show makes it easier. And I will make one comment, Jared will love this one, from the standpoint of cost. I go back to my old friend Nancy Chobin, who said, if you're spending 5 cents less to get something that's not cleaning, then you're not saving yourself any money. So
Right. Yeah.
so I go back to the thing of the proof behind the pudding, what people can show, and when somebody makes a claim that it's something in there is doing better or something, remember this from a scientific conceptive: 90% of the stuff that's added into cleaners, other than the surfactants and the cleaning enzymes, are there to condition your water. And it's because it's made for dish detergent and laundry detergent type of processes where you don't condition the water before it comes in. Most of the folks that work in SPD under TR34, and the rest of things for water quality have a much better and higher quality amount of water coming in, and they don't require all those different chemistries just to treat the water. What they need is the surfactants and the enzymes and the things that clean the product in there in the right amounts. So
yeah, there's a lot to take in there, but it sounds like kind of the bottom line of your advice to our listeners out there would be see the results, right? Because not all marketing should just be taken at face value, and certainly not all detergents are created equal. Am I saying that right?
Except everything Jared said. Yeah.
Except that's right. No, that's so good. So when I think about Stryker in particular, of course, they're known for their power instruments and just the large amount of market share that is there on those quality power instruments. Does the Blue 62 detergent in particular, or any other detergents, are they made specifically to support those power instruments?
Absolutely.
And, okay, so
I can
what
tell
makes
you
that effective?
It took a year and a half of diagnostics to determine what was working with the detergent for powered equipment.
Mm-hmm.
I have the dubious honor of actually working with the Canadian Standards Association back in 1997, where I was drawn up on things telling me that my power tools were, in the term was, impossible to clean. Now, that was just the process they were using and not the fact that it was really impossible, but they are difficult to clean. So, I mean, those endoscopes, all the things, the difficult to clean products, the formulation of what the detergent was made for was specifically done, to do difficult to clean products, of which power tools are one of them.
Right.
So people ask me all the time, how do you know that? And believe me, the engineering staff at the Stryker facility has been studying the outcomes of functionality to the detergent relation with powered equipment for the last 12 years that I know of. And data upon data upon data shows that certain things in certain cleaning chemistries will actually lessen the time of your powered equipment, which we have removed from any of the detergents that we put out there. So, I mean, there's a big point in saying that we've spent an awful lot of time determining. We're not known for that, but I will tell you what Stryker is known for, and that is for doing quality work and understanding how to get things done with their equipment. And you mentioned power tools, but I'll mention stretchers, brain aneurysms, all kinds of other products. Stryker does an enormous amount of products, implants, craniomaxillofacial things, and these detergents will work on a lot of different things.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful.
Yeah, and I would hit on that. I think just from a high level, I think for SPD leaders and managers that think about detergents and just from a cleaning standpoint, like you want to make sure that it is clean. But I think what Rod hit on as well is how is it impacting your equipment that's going through it? There are millions of instruments that are going through the repair costs, the longevity, the duration of that equipment. There's so many things that the supply chain team is going to come down and look at your service contracts, look at the warranties, look at a lot of those things, and making sure that your detergents are impacting those in a positive way, not a negative way.
That's really good. So as we've talked about detergents somewhat specifically, but also quite generically. And Rod has mentioned, the detergent that he formulated. Let's get a little bit more specific. Jared, can you tell us, like, what is the Blue 62 detergent? Where did it come from? Are there any particular product advantages that you want to mention about that product?
Yeah, I mean, I think for this one, I can give you the marketing piece, but it did come from Rod. So
Okay.
I will kind
did
of
a lot of your job for you there, man.
I will. I'll give him an alley-oop here, but I think overall, like we mentioned throughout it, is this detergent is the dye that we put in for visibility, so you can see it. How much is there. That it's working, it's activating. Ease of use, access, easy rinsability. That all of those features, the neutral pH levels, are all extremely impactful for, like we talk about, actually cleaning it, the efficiency of cleaning it, but also taking care of those tough to use instruments.
Yeah, the quick answer to that one, and I can give them a quick answer from standpoint that, did we jump into this because we're just great people that wanted to help? No, we jumped into it because we got cited for something, and you all guys will know this. Power tools had problems, and this is way back in the 90s. So the problems is like, why were they not functioning? That's when it started, and I formulated my first detergent back in 2004, and we've made the ones for the power tools in the early 2010s. So if you got that I said we had problems in the 90s. So when did I make the detergent? It's almost a decade. So if anybody, I wasn't allowed at Stryker to sit around and do nothing for 10 years. So
Right.
It was all the data that we put into, and we basically had up to 13 different chemistries that are out there. Anybody wants to know why the fragrance in Stryker was picked by the SPD staff? Matter of fact, I had to do a secret ballot because the ladies that helped me pick it were so insistent on which smell they wanted to have that I had fights going on, because I asked them, I said, which one do you like? And they looked at me and they said, well, why do you care? And I said, because whatever you pick, I don't care what it smells like. Whatever you pick is what I'm going to pick. I had 2 beta sites do it.
Yeah.
And literally I had to go with secret ballots to get the smell because they were very interested in how they could impact a product.
Yeah. And
I'm just so very happy that I did that. I felt really good about it. And believe me, does everyone like it? Oh, heck no. I get everybody called, before I retired, I got people saying, why did you make it like this? Like, I have to tell this story, but for almost a decade now, we studied it. And for the last 3 or 4 years, we actually put some data into it. It may not be the cheapest. I'll say it's the best, but I can say that myself. Someone says, can you back it up? It's like, no, that's just my opinion because I formulated it. So,
yeah,
but that's the way it goes.
Right.
No,
Yeah.
and I think that's a great point. And I think overall, Stryker doesn't do it always, but has definitely been a huge focus for Stryker that when we do develop products, we have our customers in mind. You're the ones that are using it. Our customers are the ones that are in there, that have the liability, that have the risk, that are actually touching the patient. And so we don't ever want to miss that piece of it, from thinking about engineering or thinking about new technology or thinking about all these amazing grand things. Like Rod said, we have to go straight to the customer need, and then say, hey, what are your thoughts? This is what we brought as a solution to our fix. Let's make sure that it works for you. So that's a good point.
Yeah, absolutely. And around this discussion of detergents and what works well for our teams and meets the needs for our instruments, how has that detergent evolved into the Auto 62 product specific, I'm assuming, to the washer application?
It's the same concept from, the one thing I get from somebody is, why isn't it blue? It's like, well, because all my projects are blue. Well, that's just because, the detergent itself, the adding a dyes or something like that in a detergent that goes into a washer isn't really that necessary from the standpoint. You need the color to say which one you put into what line that supplies the enzyme or the non-enzyme or the lube, whatever. But the chemistries behind those things is picking which one works for the largest majority of available equipment. So we're Stryker, okay? I mean, I don't make a washer. So what I have to do is say, will it work in a Gettiga? Will it work in a Bellamed? Will it work in a, it's the simplification of the chemistry to say, yes, it does work. The advantage of automated cleaning, which you all know this is not speaking of the choir perspective, but the advantage of automated cleaning is you can control what your automated cleaning does. I will caveat that with one aspect, no matter what washer it is. Sometimes it gets boring because people will say, I don't want to sit up all day and watch my washer. But if you take the time at some aspect to look at your washer program and actually see when it's working and circulating, the times that you're allowed, we say rinsing is the most important thing. My one caveat for everybody who ever does automated washing is when you have a final rinse, I have timed so many final rinses out. The final rinses are like 12 to 20 seconds. Even though your tape says you have a minute, when you start to time it, you'll find out that part of that is filling, part of that is circulating, part of that is draining. Well, that's all a minute. So it's the circulating part that you need to get there. So if you bump that up to another run, that's how we get better rinsing, and that's how those cleaning chemistries can be designed to make sure that final rinse takes everything off of your products. Just the FYI. So.
Yeah, and that chemical carryover can have really bad impacts on both to the life of the instrument and potentially even to the sterilization process. So I appreciate that call out.
Rinsing is the key to a lot of all cleaning perspectives. A lot of the things that happen to products that don't function well is because of residues that get, for lack of a better term, cooked on in the autoclaves. Because they're clear, you can't see them. They end up with sticky things or things not working with, and a lot of that. And I don't care from a not a chemistry cleaner perspective. I don't care what that is. Getting the rinsing right and getting picking the chemicals that can show the free rinsing that actually does work. But free rinsing chemicals, if somebody's if only rinsing it for 5 seconds, I don't care how free rinsing you are. You're not getting it off in that time. You need to find some way to get that time for the rinsing to come off. So,
yeah, that's a really interesting point to consider, and to go back and with our stopwatches take a look at our washers during that final cycle. Guys, we are about at the close of our time, but I want to end with a really practical discussion for our users out there who maybe are in the middle of a product transition or have been considering transitioning to another product, either pretreatment or with detergents in their decontamination. And I just wanted to ask, from the experience of our frontline users, do you have any tips or tricks or advice on how to do that well, how to transition detergent products well without creating a disaster for yourself?
Well, I think, again,
Jimmy, taking that one?
Education's the biggest thing. And we need support from who's ever the rep. It's got to be there. It can't just drop and go. You got to actually be there. It may take a week and follow through the process. That's going to be the biggest thing, is partnership. That's where the partnership comes in, because if not, then it won't work. So.
Yeah. I can ask one thing I could add to that. Well, I was just going to say one thing I could add for that, Bobby, is we all know numbers of number of companies that make cleaning verification tools. Mm-hmm. If you're changing cleaners, what I would advise is, don't always pick the one that you have been using or something, but don't pick one, or don't pick one that someone gives you. Go and buy 2 or 3 of them. And when you're switching, run them all and make sure that whatever you're using makes all of them clean, because I wouldn't want to say that some work with their specific chemicals, but when you're validating things, sometimes if you're using a specific chemical, you get things to work on your stuff that you're working with. So you need to use somebody else's to check the check kind of thing for that. So, yeah. Sorry, Preston, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, it's really wise.
Oh, no, man. Honestly, that's exactly what I was gonna say. Which is the funny part is just making sure that you're running the right tests and cleaning your tests, and have a lot of people involved, not only just CSPD, but your IP, and just have a lot of support and a lot of collaboration when changing whatever you're changing to. Just make sure that there's a ton of support. just to speak to Jim as far as, reps coming in and helping us out. But even on a leadership point of view, just supporting your staff and having them understand, why we're changing, the benefits of changing, and how we're going to make the change and the process steps, and just defining that is just, it's very important.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that insight, and I hope that's helpful to our listeners out there who are probably always in the process of changing something in sterile processing with the way supply chain goes and the way products go. So there's always something to be changing. Just over communicate. Make sure you do your due diligence. Don't always necessarily go with the absolute cheapest option, but what's going to be the best situation. And when you look at total cost of ownership, maybe if it's going to end up extending the life of your instruments, maybe the cheapest option is the best option. Who knows? When you look at the big picture of things. So I just want to say thanks to our panelists for joining us for the conversation today. I really appreciate you guys and the insight that you brought from your various backgrounds to this conversation. I had questions to take us another full 60 minutes, and so there's plenty more to be said on this, but thank you for helping me rush through this as we have. And thank you all for taking the time to participate in today's webinar. And with that, we'll go ahead and bring this to a close. Thank you for joining this Beyond Clean webinar. And until next time, keep fighting dirty.